Hey yo, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and despite the mounting amount of evidence that Joe Biden is likely a bottom 5 American president of all time, it still takes 2 Republicans to speak the truth to this CNN panel, and the last guy, what he says, is 100% ridiculous. Let's dive in.
We need to be looking at this in a far broader way.
It was a total disgrace. He's leaving office in disgrace because of this pardon. And it's not just the pardon, it's the lying. Lied to the American people. According to NBC News, he and his top aides hatched a plan to lie to the American people. And then this week, he didn't even have the guts to go out to the White House podium and take questions about it. He sent Karine Jean-Pierre out there, who was also part of the lying. And then she continued to gaslight the American people and the media. The American people ought to be pissed. But the media, the people who cover this White House, ought to be absolutely livid at the gaslighting and then the continued gaslighting and the hostility towards the idea of transparency. This is a monumental disgrace. You think 39% job approval is low? Wait until we test him as he leaves office. He's going out of office as one of the least liked and most divisive presidents we've ever had.
And candidly, many of us who are institutionalists criticize Trump for coming after the Department of Justice and saying it's politicized, you can't trust it. And the language in the statement pardoning Biden could have been written by Donald Trump. This was his own attorney general that he handpicked. These were career officials within the Department of Justice who did their job without fear or favor. And it felt like Biden is leaving, kind of just echoing the same sentiment that too much of this country believes, which is that you can't trust our institutions and our chief law enforcement.
He was elected to cure Trump, and he leaves office sounding like what Trump's enemies say he sounds like.
Well, let me just say this. Let's not get too righteous, self-righteous about this, right? If you walk into a boxing match and you find out the person you're fighting is an MMA fighter, sooner or later you got to take the gloves off and get into the fight. I think what they have discovered in the White House is that everyone else is playing by these very pristine rules, while Trump is doing whatever he wants to do, whatever the heck he wants to do.
He's not.
And they've got to. Yeah, but he's saying it.
The statement wasn't, "I fear that Kash Patel will come after my son." It was, "This was essentially politicized Department of Justice."
He said his own Department of Justice is corrupt. He said the Department of Justice is corrupt.
You can talk about the past if you want. I'm talking about the future, and the question is: Are you going to leave? Are you going to leave all of your people, your family, and your staff up to the place where Donald Trump and his henchmen can go after them in a political way at the Justice Department?
Well, then maybe his entire family shouldn't have been money laundering. I am sorry for getting this much of an outburst, but good grief, how deep into your own rectum do you have to insert your head to actually think that what you have to say here is true, buddy? I need to know. There's something I call head and rectum syndrome. This guy has it in spades. All right, it's worse than the ostrich sticking its head in the sand, because at least the ostrich does that to protect itself. When you put your head up your own rear end, you're doing so wantingly to protect your fragile ego and your mind from whatever's actually happening out there. And what's actually happening out there, time and time again, that we have seen over the past 2 decades, not just the past 2 presidencies, but the past 4 presidencies. We have seen American rights be trampled. We got lucky, strangely enough. And hear me out, libertarians. I know y'all don't really want to hear this. About half the Patriot Act, very good for America. The other half, very dangerous. The reason why no one really cared at the time that the NSA was spying on you was because we had this simple protection. And that is that the NSA won't use certain information to implicate you. You have to cross some major lines to do so before we even start thinking about using such clandestine information to even possibly prosecute you. You have to cross so many lines that you would basically be crossing a Rubicon in terms of becoming a traitor to the United States. And so on one hand, the fact that we had that at all was shocking, but then the American people went, we don't see this en masse, we don't see this happening that often. Then under Barack Obama, it started coming out that he was spying on Donald Trump. What is this, Watergate? And then he used the IRS to go after conservative organizations. And then there were left-wing organizations that magically had, not indictments, but they had some investigations magically not happen anymore. And then you had the FBI, who at the time of the 2016 election was basically undergoing a miniature civil war. There was the side that said, we need to do something about Hillary Clinton or we will lose all credibility. And then you have the other side that said, no, if we support Hillary Clinton, we keep our credibility. And eventually they reached a compromise where they had a haphazard, half-hearted attempt to investigate her. They found some very interesting things, but then they said, oh, well, she didn't know. The American conservative wing of politics were livid. The libertarians were already mad. But it took the centrists about 8 more years to realize, oh, something is wrong. Something is deeply wrong in the American system. And it started happening under Trump, and Trump naturally was overwhelmed. He had his own foreign policy goals, which the deep state, and I hate using the term the deep state, was okay with to some degree. But when it came to domestic policy, they kept the Hillary side propped up, and they started pushing out the side that was anti-Hillary at the time. That anti-Hillary side wasn't pro-Trump, it was just anti-Hillary. And so what happens next under Joe Biden, during the lockdowns, during the fallout that happened from that, when the average parent, I was up in Northern Virginia at the time, but I wasn't able to observe this personally. But I was close enough to understand that in a place like Loudoun County, where there's typically more Democrats than there are Republicans, even though it's a very wealthy area, and there's a whole needle in a haystack thing going on there to understand the politics in Northern Virginia. That area is wild. And these people realized that, oh, the school system was hiding the fact that a student claiming to be trans was molesting girls in the bathrooms. Yeah, that got a lot of parents really mad. And then a lot of parents then saw what was in their curriculums. They saw this weird BLM stuff. They saw this weird LGBT stuff. And they're starting to wonder why their elementary school students were starting to see this nonsense. But I think the straw that broke the camel's back was the realization that the FBI, the CIA, had dossiers and files on parents who were either anti-abortion or had gone to one of these school board meetings, and they realized that there was a good chance that the FBI was going to use that information to prosecute. That was the Rubicon for the deep state, so to speak. And that's exactly what Scott Jennings and one of his other panelists was talking about here. Under the Biden administration, everything got off the rails, from inflation to the flagrant destruction and trampling of American rights. And so the average American looked at their pocketbook, and then they looked at the legal system and went, this is messed up. We can't support a Democrat in this election, particularly one that or 2 of them for that matter, weren't mentally fit for office. One cackles and has nothing to say, and the other can't remember what to say. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was hiring and talking about all these people that, hey, maybe we need to start really reforming our justice system. Maybe we need to start really reforming how we do business in the United States. Maybe we need to bring back these tax cuts that made the economy so great until a certain certain disease broke out of a place called Wuhan and, wrecked the world economy because, communists like Democrats can't govern. Ultimately, what you're seeing in this clip is a dude who thinks that he has the narrative, whereas Scott Jennings is trying to speak truth to power, but the dude at the end, the guy I nearly lost my cool on, was talking about, well, Donald Trump's an MMA fighter in a boxing match. Okay, first off, if an MMA fighter is in a boxing match, he'd be boxing. Okay? There's certain things that aren't legal in the boxing world. So this dude already doesn't know what he's talking about. A major problem for people who have head and rectum syndrome. Then, this guy also has the audacity to talk about Trump as if he's this lawless, gets to do whatever he wants kind of dude. Yeah, lawless, huh? He went so far out of bounds in the Democrat lexicon that he had 90 felony accounts attached to his name. Well, then it sounds like the law was either working overtime to get Trump, or Trump might have been doing something wrong. Which was it? You can't have it both ways, because that means that there's some accountability, or there's an overworking of the justice system. Neither way really looks good for you and what you said right here, bub. But like it said many times before, and as far crazy as Ann Coulter is gone, there's a reason she wrote a book that if Democrats had any brains, they'd be Republicans. Now, granted, I know a lot of brainless Republicans. We usually call them rhinos. But ultimately, what's going on here is you have a dude that's believing in a false narrative, then trying to preach to the choir, preach to a bunch of rich white liberals who are still listening to CNN and just denying reality. And Scott Jennings has no choice but to just roll his eyes and go, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this level of misinformation. This dude is spewing propaganda where Scott Jennings is trying to speak the truth. And I'm tired of hearing this sort of propaganda. Maybe that is one of the hidden costs of our great First Amendment. And I'm willing to deal with that if it didn't come at the expense of the truth. And since the Democrats seem like they don't care about the truth, that CNN doesn't really care about the truth, that rich white liberals have head and neck syndrome so bad that they don't care about truth anymore, all they care about is the nice, warm, cozy little area that has a bit of a scent problem. Well, maybe one day they'll climb out of the caves that they have made for themselves and realize that they have been lied to this whole time. And Plato's allegory works pretty well when it comes to Democrats and the truth. This is a bless your heart kind of moment, but ultimately, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed this segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.